So that's
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018. My name is Michael Brooks. On a Michael Wednesday, this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Meagan Day, staff writer for the Jacobin magazine. We will talk about Brett Kavanaugh, the banality of the work of the ruling class, debunking the meritocracy myth, and austerity through paperwork with the ever-brilliant Meagan Day. Dozens of potential sources of information say they have not been contacted by the FBI in the Kavanaugh investigation. Dr. Blasey Ford, has demanded an interview in the FBI probe herself. And Donald Trump has finally gone all in on a grotesque and savage attack of Christine Blasey Ford.
I'm a counterpuncher.
I'm a counterpuncher. That's what I do when I do a fascistic rally and attack a rape victim. Could this correlate with new revelations from the New York Times on essentially his allegations that his family's taxes are just a giant, basically criminal scheme? Or the prototype future of all Republican tax policy? Remember, he only got a small loan of $1 million. Even the lie that made him look privileged was a total lie.
And I paid it back.
I paid it back. Right.
Only time he's ever done that.
Right. My dad. You have to pay it back. It's your dad. And Michael Bloomberg has just given $20 million to Senate Democrats. Cash those checks. And what the hell? Feed those 2020 delusions. I don't care. Pentagon walks back a plan to withhold cash from defense contractors after pressure from lawmakers. That sounds about right. New moves in the House of Representatives to cut off funding from the United States for the mass murder in Yemen, conducted with the U.S., the U.K., Saudi, and the United Arab Emirates. Jair Bolsonaro, Brazilian fascist candidate, is surging in the polls as reports of extortion by bosses over workers. Double speak. On one hand, the business lobby is hearing that the Brazilian constitution will be rewritten to destroy unions, and workers on WhatsApps are getting messages saying, of course he's not anti-worker and anti-union. Classic fascist doublespeak.
We won't leave anybody in the streets for lack of health care.
Exactly. And a court deals a major blow to a controversial Appalachian pipeline, momentarily halting construction even as the Trump administration is moving forward with relaxing restrictions on radiation. We talked about mercury yesterday, and a new tax package which will further decrease your wages is in the Congress. All that and much more on today's Majority Report. Sam, I think he's arrived. I was going to say, I'm going on a plane. I don't know if I'll be back again. But I think he's already in Vegas. He's already in Vegas at the... I was going to make a... Bless you. I was going to make a bra convention joke, but he's at the Torts conference.
He's gone to his happy place.
He's gone to his happy place.
I wonder if there's any mass torts revolving around bras.
Right. Until you say that that's bad for their backs. Scandal. Tell you what, Sam, I've been a lawyer for 25 years practicing.
Yeah, it would be some like Tennessee, who like just sounds like a normal guy.
Yeah, we started up a practice down there in Macomb County.
We got into the document, you couldn't believe what we saw.
Yeah, you couldn't believe it. The woman's entire back was thrown out when the snap in her just back didn't work. Now, and I thought, okay, any fair-minded person would say maybe one's just a malfunction. Well, I'll tell you what, we found documents, 3,000 women. Seriously, oh my God!
These bras snap off at 200 miles an hour.
These bras will snap off at 2,000 miles an hour. That is the velocity of a just for point of comparison here. That is the velocity of a Serena Williams serve. So a velocity of a Serena Williams serve, and this is happening to women's backs across the country. Well, exactly, Sam. I think you pretty much put the nail on the head right there. I actually think that bit might have legs. Bra class action tort Sam interviews.
Or should we say clasp action?
Ooh.
Dad jokes.
Huh. Now. I don't know how we transition from that funny material. I have been a little bit surprised that Trump hasn't gone all in disgusting before on Christine Blasey Ford. But he did just that. He was at a rally yesterday in South Haven, Mississippi. Is that right? And here he is, viciously mocking Dr. Ford. And this is, bear in mind, the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee who are pushing through the confirmation of Kavanaugh, who lied continuously, where I believe, as much as I can, I believe Dr. Ford, most people do, they're claiming that they believe her, but it's some type of confused memory or something. And as Eric Levitz pointed out, at this point, even if an FBI probe cleared Judge Kavanaugh of these charges, even if he was cleared, he's clearly displayed that he has no judicial temperament and is a whiny hack reactionary who had a meltdown on national television and went on about, he literally talked about these charges in the context of a Clinton conspiracy theory. That's Newsmax editorial stuff, which again shows you that that's what the Republican Party is. It's all a Newsmax editorial. But they are in the contradictory position of feigning compassion and concern about these issues while pushing it through. Trump is going to go the full disgusting route by just attacking her and really expose them even more, because this is what they're doing. They just don't want to own it like Trump is doing. But what Trump is doing here, this is what the Republican Party is doing, even if they feign concern and respect.
What he's going through, 36 years ago, this happened. I had one beer, right? I had one beer. Well, do you think it was? Nope, it was one beer. Oh, good. How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. I don't know. What neighborhood was it in? I don't know. Where's the house? I don't know. Upstairs, downstairs, where was it? I don't know. But I had one beer. That's the only thing I remember. And a man's life is in tatters. A man's life is shattered. His wife is shattered. His daughters, who are beautiful, incredible young kids. They destroy people. They want to destroy people. These are really evil people.
That was what Lindsey Graham's thing was. And people should recognize that this is, again, this is the Republican Party message, even if, and the Republican Party strategy and the Republican Party commitment, even if other members of the committee are simultaneously speaking out of both, they're speaking out of both sides of their mouths, and they're voting and they're muscling and they're moving politically in one way, which is to completely railroad this process because they don't care. And as with pretty much everything else with the Republican Party, from oligarchy to corruption to racism to xenophobia to misogyny, Trump is the one who speaks it clearly. So believe him, because he's the essence of this whole thing.
And this works on his base because, I mean, most people don't understand the psychology of trauma. And,
Right.
Blasey Ford explained it on the stand, but most people probably didn't get it. So when you hear him say that, like, it makes sense to people, to his people. Like, they're very ready to believe it.
There's a Quinnipiac poll that came out yesterday about non-college educated white men. 65% support confirming Kavanaugh, 66 believe Kavanaugh over Ford. It's basically 2/3 of uneducated white, non-college educated white men believe Kavanaugh, and that's what Trump is playing to. And it is a terrifying number. I do sort of wonder if it would be like 80% if we were in like even the 90s, but who knows what progress
and
is
it's
like.
not
90s
just men.
might not even be a story. No,
like the women who support Trump still support
white women,
Trump.
yep. Yeah,
they didn't care about grab them by the pussy, and they don't care about this.
Women were cheering just as much as the men in that.
Okay, folks, no elegant way of transitioning. Sam likes ads. Let Sam read you an ad, and then we will be returning with Meagan Day from Jacobin magazine.
Hey, folks, it's Sam here. And support for today's show comes from Brooklinen. Named the winner of the best online bedding category by Good Housekeeping, Brooklinen is the fastest growing bedding brand in the world with over 20,000 five-star reviews. And I will tell you this, one of them is mine. Their mission to bring five-star hotel quality sheets to everyday life, offering luxury sheets without the luxury makeup. Their method, eliminating the middleman to keep things personal from design to manufacturing to custom service and beyond. Okay, I have, as you know, multiple sets of Brooklinen sheets. I don't want to get too detailed here, but the way that we do it with our separation is the parents switch back and forth. So I have them in my outside place. Wait, Jimmy, are you making a face? Like, should I not be talking about this? Or is that something totally different? Okay. So I've got in two different locations sets of Brooklinen sheets, and I love them both. I finally get to choose the classic, I think they call it percane. I'm not sure what they call it, but it's the classic cooler cotton. And my daughter now has demanded a set of Brooklinen sheets for her as well because she loves my sheets. They're so comfortable. And they look like I actually know what I'm doing when it comes to like something to do with style, which is, believe me, a huge uphill battle. My Brooklinen sheets are the best. They're the most comfortable sheets I've ever slept on. Brooklinen.com is giving an exclusive offer for just my listeners. Get $20 off and free shipping when you use the promo code MAJORITY at brooklinen.com. Brooklinen is so sure you're going to love your new sheets. They offer a risk-free 60-night satisfaction guarantee and a lifetime warranty on all their sheets and comforters. The only way to get $20 off and free shipping is to use the promo code MAJORITY at brooklinen.com. That's brooklinen.com, promo code MAJORITY. Brooklinen, these really are the best sheets ever.
Ever. I got to learn. I have to learn from the master right there. Casper. I like beds. Okay, everybody. We are going to be right back with Meagan Day on the Majority Report. Welcome back to the Majority Report. Michael Brooks here. Joining us now is Meagan Day. She is a staff writer at Jacobin magazine. Meagan, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Meagan, you wrote a great piece called The Banality of Brett Kavanaugh. I want to quote from it briefly. The Brett Kavanaugh hearing was a kaleidoscope of family and God and prestigious clerkships, spliced with boofing, ralphing, and brewskis. It was a thorough dressing down. In the end, one was left with the impression of an unremarkable guy who was born on a conveyor belt to power, without much obligation to distinguish himself from his peers. On the contrary, his success was relatively guaranteed on the condition that he didn't distinguish himself from them, that he simply played nice with the fellas and not necessarily nice with women, from prep school to the Ivy League to the White House and beyond. So I mean, you captured it, but break that down for us in terms of what you saw about how non-remarkable this guy was and what that says about how we conceive of elites in general.
Right. So I watched the Brett Kavanaugh hearing like everyone else. I was chatting with friends while watching it. I think everyone was just stunned at what we were seeing. I'd never seen anything like that. I don't typically tune in to congressional proceedings. I think they're usually pretty boring. This one was far from boring. And right. Afterward, I was, I got a call from my editor, and he was like, "So what do you have to say about this?" And I honestly couldn't think of anything to say. There's so much that made me angry. There was so much that boiled my blood, so much that seemed unfair, so much that seemed anti-democratic or counter-democratic about the whole process. And the thing that finally, in that conversation with my editor, really ended up rising to the top for me is that the way that Brett Kavanaugh responded to questions about his prior bad behavior, alleged bad behavior, by talking about how much he'd earned, essentially how much he'd earned the right to be on the Supreme Court because he'd gone to the very best schools and had the very best appointments and knew the very best people. You could hear it. It happened maybe 7 or 8 times that was how he responded to a specific question about his past behavior. And so that got me thinking a little bit about this guy as a sort of ambassador for meritocracy. Certainly not the only one. In fact, the vast majority of people who constitute our political elite all went to the same schools. They went to Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. And Brett Kavanaugh is among them. But I also was thinking about the way that everyone watching this could sort of, the mask of power slips a little bit in this moment. And you realize that this is just an ordinary, extremely grating, not particularly insightful dude who got, as I wrote in the piece, born on a conveyor belt to power. He was sort of on the condition that he didn't, that he moved with the pack, and that he looked out for his buddies, and clung tight, stayed close, that he would more or less end up in a position of power, whether that was in politics or whether that was in real estate or finance, or, as I mentioned later in the piece, military weapons manufacturing. It could have been anything, but he was going to make it. And I think that the thing that that for us to realize in this moment, and the thing that I think many of my peers, because I'm 29, and I think that, as I write in the piece, new generations have to be exposed to the collapse of the illusion of meritocracy over and over again. Meritocracy being, of course, ruled by the most excellent. The idea that the people at the top have some sort of special innate excellence. This seemed like a moment when that really crumbled. Just watching this extremely unremarkable guy and wondering how in the hell he got there and starting to put the pieces together for yourself.
Right. And you talked about, you said, yeah, look, juvenile, sexist, emotionally reactive. And I think that's that specific point is really important. And it comes up again and again and again, this idea that people like that, he would have really need to have radically gone out of his way to not be a success. And one of the things which of course then makes the whole idea of success or not success a much more muddy concept than we like to talk about it usually, right? Like if he would have needed to sort of bend over backwards to not be quote unquote successful, then what exactly does that mean? And in addition to that, it struck me that obviously he lied. Well, I mean, in my view, obviously he lied quite a bit during the proceedings about things both, large and incredibly serious, and maybe things that are relatively trivial. One of the areas, though, that he got dinged on was they reported the day after when he said, I got into Yale Law of my own merit. And, of course, it was revealed, I think it was his grandfather was an alumni of Yale Law. And people went and, it's a totally fair interpretation. There's another Brett Kavanaugh lie. Mine was, I don't think he's lying about that. I think in his self-conceptualization that isn't even an added bonus. He wouldn't have been there without his merits. Maybe grandpa went there, but that's totally incidental. So we're also, it's like we saw how non-remarkable they are, but we also saw an element of the psychosis of this particular type of elite in terms of how they conceive of themselves.
I completely agree with that. I mean, I think part of it has to do with exposure. People from this particular class stratum and the kind of insular world that people like Brett Kavanaugh inhabit their entire lives are not necessarily exposed to lots of people who work significantly harder than they have ever worked and don't end up, on the Supreme Court deciding important matters for the entire nation. So I think that to some extent it's just like a matter of lack of exposure, but it's also the case that they're living in this fantasy as well. All of us are. It's not just that the people at the bottom, the rest of us, the 99%, whatever you want to call us, are living with the fantasy that the people at the top have some special wiring, some sort of like special hardwiring that's like actually superior to the rest of us, that gives them superior insight, they have superior talents, they work harder, and so on and so forth. They actually believe this as well. It's sort of self-justifying. It's what keeps them going. And, if I could speak a little bit on my own journey through meritocracy.
Please.
First of all, it's an important ideological component of capitalism because it is the justification for inequality in the United States. The idea that if you are at the top, it's because you worked hard and you had what it takes to get to the top. And that, of course, contains in it a secondary or corollary logic, which is that if you're at the bottom, it's because you didn't have what it takes or you didn't work hard enough to make it to the top. And anybody can make it from the bottom to the top. That is a rough description of what meritocracy is. As you can see, it obviously functions extraordinarily well, and it dovetails very well with capitalism. It's a sort of ideological mechanism of capitalism, if you will. For me personally, I think that despite, being, roughly a progressive or a left liberal for a long time, I think I had still a latent understanding that there was something superior about the people at the top for a long time, specifically until the 2016 election. And with the 2016 election was the moment when it was my big sort of emperor wears no clothes moment. In particular, I was increasingly frustrated by the fact that the Democratic Party frequently refused to stand firmly, consistently, full-throatedly on the side of working people. But I figured that there was probably some reason why that was the case, besides just like a sheer thick-skulled inattention to the masses. Maybe the people in charge know how to win. They're in charge of battling Republicans because they know how to win. That's why they got that job. They got the job of a critical job of defeating the right, because they're the people who are good at that sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And we know they're good because they're in charge, right? Do you see how meritocracy is a sort of tautology?
Right.
This completely fell apart for me during the 2016 election. I was like, these people do not know what the hell they're doing. And in fact, they're really screwing it up for all of us. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. Every sort of all of the resistance of the Democratic Party to embracing the passion, the left energy of its own base, and instead trying to strike some sort of pose that was carefully calibrated to both siphon off a little bit of that progressive energy from the base, but also make the donors happy and also make the moderates happy, and so on and so forth. It just was a recipe for disaster. And of course, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but you realize the Democratic Party lost control of both houses, and this is a decades-long problem. We're now about to lose control of the Supreme Court, obviously. So for me, that voice, the little voice in my head that was always telling me, the people at the top are there because they're better at solving these problems. It fell permanently quiet for me in 2016. It made it easier for me to see that something similar was happening in the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. I think that there are plenty of people watching that who assume that people on the Supreme Court, people who are nominated, get to the point where they're nominated to be on the Supreme Court, must have superior judgment. These are the highest judges in the land. In fact, what you see is that they're just at the top because they're at the top, because that is where they were born. That is, all of the structures were in place to float them to the top, specifically on wings of respectable pedigree and impressive social connections. And they don't have better judgment than you, and they don't have superior insights or talents. And here's the most important thing: they would absolutely hate for us to realize this, because they don't have irreplaceable qualities or insights that would oblige us to put up with their bullshit.
Right.
I mean, these people make decisions that devastate the lives of millions of people, and we give them a pass because we assume that they're best suited for the task. When we realize that they aren't necessarily, I think that inspires a lot of popular political confidence.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And actually, there was a piece I think Eric Levitz wrote about how John Roberts is actually, this is something he's been very worried about in terms of the branding of the Supreme Court, because under his leadership, this has already been, even with that, quasi. I mean, Kennedy was, as you know, Kennedy was kind of a swing vote on important but social issues, basically. He was not, at the end of the day, when it came to corporate union and certainly voting and civil rights, not to mention, corporate money influence in politics, he was a hard right vote with the other four. So, but Roberts, and part of the reason that Roberts, voted against the repeal of Obamacare, although, allowing states to opt out of the Medicaid expansion, which is obviously the most successful part of Obamacare, he's been really trying to cultivate, while they quietly basically just implement a very extreme right ideological agenda with regards to voting rights and unions and so on through the court, he's wanted to kind of hold the brand of the court as still some type of noble, transcendent institution. And this definitely, you're talking about it in a much deeper and broader sense than just the court, really just the whole concept of the leadership class, meritocracy, and who we put on a pedestal and why. But that brand was shot by, a red-faced guy talking about beer.
Mm-hmm.
And how
totally. It absolutely was. This is just another sort of, like I say in the piece that I wrote, this is another data point in the collapse of meritocracy, and the data points are clustering closer together. This is the court's time to experience a crisis of legitimacy caused by the crumbling illusion of meritocracy. But the important thing to note is that the court is far from alone, right. And in fact, the greatest threat to this illusion in all American history is in the White House right now, Donald Trump. Right. It's like I say, it's not a coincidence that popular politics are gaining a new dynamism under his presidency, and that includes something we would consider positive, the swelling ranks of the socialist left, but also the flash of youthful alt-right energy on the right. I think that the reason we're seeing that is because Trump is, like, as I write in the piece, a grenade tossed into the fortress of meritocracy. Like, Obama was so competent, and he just had this kind of Ivy League cool, right. that actually kind of it wrapped it all up in a bow. This idea, the idea that people got to the top because they were meant to be there, and where they are is proof of where they were always meant to be. They have a special gene that you don't have. Obama seemed like proof to many people that was the case, and I would argue even for people who disagreed with his politics. But Trump completely blows a hole in that entire thing. He's transparently a jackass, pardon my French. He's an egregious bully, and worst of all, of course, he's unprofessional. And that just causes it causes the entire house of cards to fall a little bit. You realize that there is not actually a pyramid that you ascend because you are the best, and the best of the best of the best get to the very top of the pyramid and get to be president. This guy is the worst of the worst. And I would argue even for people who agree with his politics and quite like him, that's actually what a lot of people find very attractive about him, is that they've already felt that the myth of meritocracy is wearing thin a little bit, and they have a kind of nihilistic death drive about it.
I think so. I think some of them do, yeah. I think that's true. No, I'm just reflecting on that because I think it's always like, how do you tease out, like, what was the small, in my view, very, very small but not insignificant group of people who are really desperate, that were taken in by his con of populism? What's the vast majority of people who voted for him who are just Republicans, and Republicans are this far-right white identity politics party, and Trump's the perfect candidate of that. But that's another interesting third equation. What's the element of people who are just like, fuck it? Like, let's just burn this. Yeah,
I think there's a little bit of fuck it, especially in the first group, the people who have probably, I would say, in my experience talking to, and I wrote a book where prior to the 2016 election, I spent a lot of time interviewing working class white people in rural America, and found that there's a sort of like, this is not necessarily a negative thing. I think it can be a positive thing. There's a sort of incoherence to their political ideology. It's not as crystallized as it is for people with, lots of educational opportunities, people on the coast, people who spend a lot of time in the discourse or whatever. These folks are a little more flexible, I would say. And there's a degree to which they're just they know there's something sort of rotten about the whole myth that they're being sold of meritocracy, because what the myth of meritocracy says about them is that they are worthless and that they are absolute failures, right? And there's a certain degree of an element of pride in blowing that to smithereens by rejecting the polished and professional candidate who comes from the world of the elites, the world of people who graduated with the best degrees from the best schools and know all the best people, and instead choosing someone who appears to be an outsider. Though, of course, the problem in the United States is that we have a lack of class consciousness, and so people don't realize that he is in fact an insider of the capitalist class. They see him as a political outsider, and I think that that's attractive to people who are extremely resentful about the effects of the myth of meritocracy on their own sense of self-worth, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And it's also very funny, too, to kind of even go with the campaign frame of like, well, we might be able to rescue your kids because they might not suck as much as you do. Like, even that is a kind of extraordinary message, like, on those lines. Like, well, your kids should have opportunities. You obviously are worthless.
You fucked it up.
Yeah, you fucked it up. They might be able to get into a good college and be somewhat respectable, but obviously you're trash. I mean, and I think it's also interesting too, because Trump, it's like, right, the correct read and what isn't, because we, as you say, because we don't have class politics, is like, this guy's the ultimate, trust fund baby, the ultimate product of, unlimited access and privilege, and nobody with any different, class, race, gender, background could live, literally could just live the life he did in terms of things handed to him for him to have the career he's had, let alone get away with everything that he's gotten away with, let alone walk into the presidency. And then conversely, what I do think people like about him is, I think it's like, he's also there is a certain small part of him in a really grotesque way that he is in on the joke. Like, I get it. This is all nonsense. And if you kind of, there was that part of him that's like, see, isn't this all a con? And I'm like the ultimate con, and I'm sort of winking while I do it. And I think it kind of works. It works in both ways for that dynamic you're talking about, because it really exposes the whole thing. Even in some ways, as you say, by him doing it, like, whatever, all these other people said all the right things, and they did this and they did that. I just woke up and was ready to go on TV and have a rally. And Jeb Bush looks all low energy. Sorry.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I think what's important to note is that Trump didn't cause what we're talking about, this collapse of meritocracy. Right. By the way, I'm not quite certain that this is the last gasp of meritocracy. I'm not saying that it's collapsing and we'll never see it again. I definitely think there's a crisis of legitimacy of the myth of meritocracy right now. Trump didn't cause it. The important thing, it was caused in large part, it started to be caused in, I think in the 1970s with the turn toward neoliberalism. And I think that it was significantly accelerated by the 2008 financial crisis. But the problem is that the collapse of meritocracy sort of tears a hole in the fabric of our national mythology. And there are a couple of different ways that somebody can ride in and take advantage of that crisis of legitimacy. You could have Bernie Sanders talking about how, screw this meritocracy stuff, screw this whole, learn to code. And if you don't learn to code, then go, die in some small town in the Midwest like you deserve.
That sounds like Peter Thiel's new book, actually. That would be a good,
right.
Yeah. Code or die.
He's like, go code or die.
Yeah.
So and then Bernie Sanders says, screw code or die. We're gonna build an America that works for the people who create the wealth. Every last cent of wealth in this country is created by workers. It's not created by bosses. You create the wealth. The boss skims off the top. He takes it for himself. We're going to take it back from him. We're going to give it to ourselves, the people who created it, and we're going to have a better world for all. We can have it. It's possible. All it requires is the political will. That's one way to come in and take advantage of crumbling meritocracy, the sort of bipartisan neoliberal consensus whereby, people with the best degrees get to make all the paternalistic decisions for everybody else. The other way to take advantage of it is to be an absolute abject troll like Donald Trump and to ride in and say, isn't this fun? Let's blow it up. Let's blow the whole thing up. Right. And I, unfortunately, the latter is ascendant, but it might be temporary. We don't know. I have some optimism. I think it's possible that this is the sort of immature. As a culture, we are immature in dealing with the collapse of meritocracy, but that collapse is a good thing. Right now, we've made the wrong. We've started off on the wrong foot, but it's possible that we could see a progressive surge. We could see a left-wing surge. We could see the rise of democratic socialism taking up a little bit of space in the vacuum that's created by the collapse of meritocracy.
Right, and so the question, it's an evolve or devolve moment for sure.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Yeah. We have a few minutes left. I just want to touch on this because in some ways I think this fits in another way with the sort of the inverse of meritocracy and people who deserve to be terrorized, essentially. You have another piece called Austerity by Paperwork. We talked about this, not an example you used, I don't think specifically, but last night on Michael Brooks' show, we talked about how 10 years into a program to forgive certain forms of student loans for people who did jobs in the public sector, different forms of like teaching or public contribution, they set up a program where you could, get discharged of your student loans. The first crop of people who have applied for it that could apply for it, and they rejected, I believe, 99% of people's claims, right? And accepted literally 1%, which I think translated to, I think under 1,000 people. So this is a whole other arena. And one other example to put in, for all of his, Bill de Blasio is not, he's not the great helmsman of our future. But one really small but significant programmatic difference in New York City was, under de Blasio, there's a lot of investment in public awareness campaigns for what working and poor people have access to in terms of public programs. Under Bloomberg, there was never an ad on the subway for, the type of SNAP program you might be eligible for, as an example. So there's this whole other set of people getting blocked from access and, defunding things that actually haven't even been cut and are even still available simply through the sort of paperwork and framing of those programs. And this was a really good piece as well. So maybe you could just touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason I took the opportunity to write this piece after reading about what happened in Arkansas, which is that, the Trump administration has been encouraging states to implement work requirements for Medicaid recipients. Never mind that the vast majority of people on Medicaid work, and that of the others who don't work, a plurality of them are either ill or disabled, or they perform unpaid but necessary care work in families where somebody else is the breadwinner. So they take care of children or elderly relatives because, of course, they can't pay for hospice care or nursing home, and they don't have universal child care, right? So these things are necessary. If they go to work, things are going to really, really fall apart. So Arkansas decided to take the bait, and they implemented these work requirements for Medicaid. And they said you have to report, this many times, and tell us that you're working or that you're looking for a job, and then you can keep your benefits. And if you don't, then you don't get to keep your benefits. The problem was, it's not just that it's cruel on the face of it. For, like I said, there are lots of reasons why people who don't work. And another reason, of course, is that there aren't always jobs to be found, especially if you have a criminal record. I think it's over 25% unemployment for people with criminal records. So telling people, go find a job that's not going to be given to you or else you lose your health care. I mean, this is extremely cruel. But it's also, there's another problem, which is that people did not know that they didn't know that the program was being implemented at all. And plenty of people who do work actually and are currently recipients of Medicaid in Arkansas, thousands of them just got booted off of Medicaid, and thousands more are coming simply because it's too complicated. They not only that, well, first of all, there was a lack of awareness about the program to begin with, and second of all, it's extremely complicated to figure out how to actually report. And poor people don't have time for that. Right. You know what I mean? People are busy trying to stay afloat, and they can't necessarily. And also, apparently all of it is online. I just learned this after writing the piece, and rural people don't necessarily have access to computers or to dial up, and there are some literacy questions and digital literacy and all this stuff. So anyway, this is the point of the piece, is to say that this is not an accident. The point of any more restrictive eligibility requirement of any kind on any social program, always and forever, is to thin the rolls. It's to kick people off, to make it less expensive. And when I say less expensive, there's a caveat there. Obviously, the costs are going to crop up somewhere else in society, whether that's because people now are experiencing substance abuse problems and they're on the streets and the cops are being called on them. Whether it's that or something else, the costs come back. But this makes the programs themselves less expensive, which is always number one on the GOP's wish list. And the reason that it's number one on their wish list, aside from that they're gremlins, which they are, is that they are also engaged in a decades-long process of giving tax breaks to the wealthiest people in their state, to industry, and to the richest, 1 or 10%. And so they need to find that money somewhere in order to keep that program going without the ship capsizing. And a good example is that last month, literally just a couple of weeks ago, Governor Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas revealed a plan to reduce the state's top marginal tax rate, giving away $144 million to the state's richest residents. That money's got to come from somewhere. Yep. Is it a coincidence that thousands and thousands of people are being kicked, who do work for a living, are being kicked off the Medicaid rolls because they're not meeting their work requirements? I don't think that's a coincidence at all. So the point that I was trying to make is that complicated programs are actually one of the most clever instruments of austerity and of the right-wing economic agenda. And then, if I could add on to that, which I didn't say in the piece, but which I firmly believe, the answer is universal programs. Not only do you not, when you said, ads on the subway for what people are, what people are eligible for, I think that's great. When you have complicated programs, you really need to get the word out.
Right.
But you could just not have complicated programs. You could just have universal programs. For people. We could just have single-payer health care, and then everybody has it, and everybody gets it no matter what.
Right.
That would solve that problem.
And then nobody has to waste any time with any of it, whether fiddling around on a website or subway ads or anything. We just have, obvious reality. Somebody told me a story the other day of seeing a guy on the street. They weren't really paying attention. He was staggering a little bit. He was drunk, probably a little drunk. He falls on a curb and basically just like smacks his face at a, pretty hard on the ground. And, they went up to him, they and one other person. And when he sort of came to, his primary response with like blood on his face was, "Do not call an ambulance for me."
Yeah.
Like that was his first
you hear
instinct.
this a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hear these stories a lot. It's actually really heartbreaking, and it kind of drives home for you the reality of all of this austerity. I mean, we could be outraged when we look at the numbers, the $144 million given to the richest Arkansans, and then the thousands of people kicked off the rolls. But the reality is that those are people who, when they experience medical emergencies, they're not going to want to have an ambulance called for them. They're going to risk death because the threat of medical debt or bankruptcy is too much for them to bear.
Absolutely. And you're right. Universal programs, democratic socialism. That's it. I mean, I wish socialism or barbarism was just like a fun thing to say to provoke people, but it's kind of stressfully true. So
yeah, that's right.
It is what it is. And we have a shot, as you say. Meagan Day, staff writer for Jacobin magazine. Really appreciate your time as always.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. All right, folks. Become a member of the Majority Report today. Majority.fm/become a member. Tomorrow, Sam joins us from Vegas, where he takes on the weird, wonderful world of torts. And actually, we always know, those conversations are actually pretty fascinating.
That's it was a tort week that I started here, actually.
I remember that. That was funny.
I remember it was the Teflon stuff.
The Teflon stuff,
There's a documentary coming out about that now.
Yeah. And then we would be sort of like, talking off mic a bit, and then all of a sudden you just hear like, "Is anybody listening?"
No, that was the next time.
Oh, that
the
was
first time.
I forgot.
Yeah, I remember that.
This is before you, but it was.
I was going to say, I think it happens. It will happen over the next 2 days.
Yeah,
it happens always. Yeah.
Yeah. I was on my best behavior the first time, but I feel
right.
Like
you were. That was extremely. That was this is fascinating.
Guys,
cover.
pay attention.
Guys, there are exploding sneakers.
Did you hear about these Remington rifles?
Did you hear about these? This is horrible. The next time you were like, I remember the first time I slowed down a Nixon tape, and then I thought, how do I speed this up? And then I was like, really? And then all of a sudden he was like, yo, it's listening. Hello?
Truly a rite of passage.
Right. It is a rite of passage. The Vegas initiation. Become a member of the Majority Report today, majority.fm/become a member. You can find the links on YouTube and the podcast page to sign up. Pennies a day for a 5-day-a-week left show. Independent, unbossed, unbought, unbossed left show. Like us on iTunes, write a review, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can follow all of us on Twitter, as well as at majority.fm on Twitter. Last night's Michael Brooks show, Daniel Bessner came by. He wrote this piece in the New York Times 2 weeks ago on a left foreign policy. We talked about why the concept of national security is fictitious, what left foreign policy actually means from a policy-making perspective. It was fascinating. Wealth and climate, Gulag segment, amazing work by union organizers against, to try to persuade Joe Manchin to vote the right way. I don't think he is on Brett Kavanaugh, but they did incredible work. Plus, a very in-depth post-game. As always, this weekend, illicit history on the super elite with, in fact, Meagan Day. And I just banked one with Milton Alamati, one of our Africa analysts, on the history of the DRC Congo and the Great Lakes Civil War and how it relates to what makes your iPhone possible. Patreon.com/TMBS, Patreon.com/TMBS. Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. Tons of new clips up, including about 20 minutes of Matt Taibbi and I on Thomas Friedman that just went up. And that was, in fact, very fun. Antifada, what's up?
So this week's Antifada is dropping tomorrow. We have artist, journalist, all-around awesome person, Molly Crabapple, talking about mutual aid in Puerto Rico and all of the different ways people have been resisting austerity there, both before and after Hurricane Maria. We also have unlocked our first in a series called History is a Weapon, where Sean explains historical materialism. So that's now free to listen to, whether or not you're a member. We also did a fun little bonus. You've heard of Real Tanky Hours. This one was a Real Maoist Hours. And we did a reading of this document. I don't know if it's real. Maybe it's real. Maybe it's not. The fact that I can't tell doesn't reflect that well on the modern Maoist movement. But we did a dramatic reading of this document called Towards a Protracted People's War in the Florida Everglades. It was supposedly leaked from a Maoist group in Florida.
Tomorrow's news today.
So that'll be out soon, too.
That actually sounds pretty fun.
I
feel like that is the type of thing that will be like a major use of resources by the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security.
What, false flagging Maoist stuff?
No, seriously investigating that while they ignore white supremacists.
That'd be a good strategy. I mean, I thought about it from the PSYOP perspective, right? Like you infiltrate and do these fake Maoist groups to try to confuse the lefts. But from a left perspective, it might be useful to make these fake groups that the FBI has to investigate. It's very confusing.
I know, I know that I always piss people off with their little political projects, or not always, but at times. But I'd say Maoism in particular is a very 1930s agrarian Chinese land-based vanguardist communism for 2018 United States. Interesting.
They've updated it.
Interesting
for
mashup,
the Florida
guys.
Of today. They got a snake economy.
I do like the music. I will give them that. Did you guys use this? You better use this for real. This is what we use for Maoist Bernie.
Oh, we should,
Red sun in the
add
sky,
it in.
baby.
No, because part of the plan
the sunflower seeds grows like the peasants will.
They're going to play music like this to propagandize and radicalize the Florida swamp people.
It's going to work.
It's going to work.
This is going to be at the Florida State Seminoles game.
Well, here's the thing. They have a grounding in history because there was a protracted people's war in the Florida. I don't know if it was in the Everglades, but the Seminoles and the Seminole Indians. Mm-hmm. This was a 7-year-long Indian war.
That's what Drain the Swamp originally referred to, I think.
Jesus Christ.
I think that's right.
Really?
Yeah.
We should look that up.
It was either that or slave catching. It had one of those two.
It was involved. It was associated with slave catching because they took in a lot of runaway slaves and actually intermarried and created a group of people called the Black Seminoles, and they were really badass. And this war lasted 7 years before the government finally defeated them. So there is a historical precedent for this.
Well, that's pre-Maoist, though.
Well, yes.
Don't attempt to colonize Native history with your fantasy-based Maoism, guys. But I look forward to hearing that. Matt, Literary Hangover.
Yeah, we zoomed past 1,000 subs on YouTube.
Sweet.
We're at 1,015 now, so I'm happy about that.
Nice.
Me and my friend Chris are going to record a bit on Corey Robin's The Reactionary Mind. I've been going through that. One thing that reminded me of that, what we were talking about earlier, is the way Trump's like, Brett Kavanaugh's life has been destroyed. His life has been destroyed.
Totally.
This is something conservatives do, focus on the individual, right? This is Edmund Burke talking about, isn't it horrible what happened to Marie Antoinette?
Mm-hmm.
And that is not what's important right now. Yeah, sure, it's bad that a family gets hurt, but as we'll see, like with the Sokolov sound, what's going on with ICE is destroying a lot more families in a lot more severe ways than what's happening to Kavanaugh's. What's important is the Supreme Court, and like that's far more important than what happens to an individual's life. So anyway, that pattern has been there. The conservatives always want you wouldn't you feel bad if you were falsely accused after you were about as you were about to achieve a Supreme Court seat? That's how conservatives get the sort of populist victimhood thing, and it's gross. But so that's coming out this weekend, and also for patrons, I'm reading Hope Leslie, one of the early forgotten stories, novels by a woman in America.
Sweet. All right, everybody. I am Zeron. See you in the fun half.
Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey Sam, hey Andy, you guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
That's good stuff. Welcome to the fun half. Let's take a call. You're calling from a 954 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? Hello? Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I hung up. Call back. No, call back. 954, call back. You're calling from a 347 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Oh, yeah. My name's Freddie. I'm from the Bronx.
Hey, Freddie. What's going on?
Hey, not much. I just wanted to ask you guys a couple. Well, I actually had two questions.
Okay.
But the first thing I wanted to ask was, I mean, I know Sam's not here, but you guys had a segment last week about Jimmy Dore going after Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know exactly what is like. I mean, you guys were very critical of him, and I can understand why. His perspective is a little too extreme. But what is the difference with that perspective and what the Democratic Socialists of America in New York City are putting forward, and what's going on with the Working Families Party in regards to them being even like necessarily having their arm twist to try to endorse Cuomo?
Well, I'll speak to first just the Working Families Party. The Working Families Party, as far as I understand it, it's important that people in New York City actually vote in the general election for the Working Family Party line. I don't know who's going to be on that line. It might still be Cynthia Nixon, because they need to get at least 50,000 votes to keep that line. So that's how I'm going to be voting in the New York general election. So I'm sure that the Working Family Party has that specific interest. As for DSA, what's the difference between DSA and Jimmy Dore, Jamie?
Well, are you referring to the statement that the steering committee put out? Did you read that?
Yeah, the statement that was put forward by the DSA of New York City, basically, it kind of threw Ocasio under the bus in regards to her endorsement of Cuomo and Democrats for the upcoming primary.
I don't know that it threw her under the bus. Like, we're still working with her. She's been coming to our meetings. But just because we support someone doesn't mean that we have to agree with them on every single thing, and we can say where we disagree.
Right, so then what's the difference between that position and Jimmy Dore's?
The difference is that he's ready to just call her, garbage and useless because she did this one thing that he doesn't like.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Dore is not doing politics. I mean, he's just doing, I don't have much. Does what Jamie just said to you make sense? Because I don't have anything to add to that.
I mean, I don't know if I agree. I mean, honestly, I'm going to say outright, like, I disagree with Jimmy Dore's position and the DSA's position on that.
And by the way, she's tweeted since then to say that she did not endorse Cuomo.
Wait, what were you disagree with? Who and who?
Both DSA and Jimmy Dore's. I mean, I'm not pro like antagonism in regards to the Ocasio stuff. Like my whole concern as like I'm a union member, right? Like I agree with you in regards to wanting to vote on the Working Families Party line. But if they are endorsing Nixon, and I think there's a bit of an issue in New York City electoral left in thinking that Cynthia Nixon was a very good candidate. I don't think she was a very good candidate. She lost the demographics in New York City pretty heavy-handedly, where Ocasio won in her districts in the Bronx and Queens. And I mean, Jumaane Williams did a way better job than her in the election itself, the primary.
Well,
I
don't think there's any real disagreement with that. I mean, I think it's a little ungenerous to Cynthia Nixon. I think Cynthia Nixon was an enormous asset in terms of destroying, as we always say, she helped destroy the IDC, which is big. Nobody knew about that before she put that front and center. That wasn't a big issue.
Is that really? I mean,
she
this
did.
Is where I have to disagree. I have to disagree because, I mean, if you look at the Biaggi campaign, for example, where Biaggi won the same district where Ocasio won, and it was very clear-handed.
Sure.
But that district was completely, handedly won by Cuomo as well.
I'm not talking about, but I'm not talking. One can vote for Cuomo and still see that she moved Cuomo. I mean, it's not a coincidence that he changed his view on voting rights, on marijuana, and the IDC association. If she didn't run, he wouldn't have done those things. And also, I mean, I don't know how much we got it. Cynthia Nixon is not the most amazing candidate ever. Andrew Cuomo is a really, really bad governor who has been a proponent of every single oligarchic interest that New York has. I mean, I guess, though, I mean, to loop back to you, though, I think DSA is engaging in politics and trying to have a really smart inside-outside strategy, and Jimmy Dore is just selling a boring repeat brand on YouTube. That's what I think the difference is. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
And all right, sure. I mean, I have a bit of disagreements, but it's all right. I just know the second point. The document that Jamie was referring to at the end, that's clearly a fake document. Like there's plenty of those documents that go out online. They're usually kind of like documents that are meant to purposely be like fishing for people to do stupid shit.
Are you a Maoist, sir?
What's that?
Are you a Maoist, sir?
Sorry?
Are you a Maoist, sir?
No, I mean I've read into that tradition. I mean there's a clear I mean I disagree with you, Matt, about like the sort of like the dynamic of that tradition being completely useless. I mean the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, all these groups came out of that tradition. The whole era of the late 60s and 70s has certain respective relationship to that.
No,
but I mean,
I'm agree
just saying
that Mao has
third
things
world
to teach us, for sure. Not all Maoists. And I realize the thing is probably fake, but it's still funny, so we read it.
Yeah, okay. I was just making sure that you understand, like, there's a lot of fake-ass shit out there. But take care, guys.
Thank you, Freddie. Freddie with there is a lot of fake-ass shit
The
out
point
there.
about Cuomo winning
true.
the district that AOC ran in is why I didn't give a shit that she didn't pick that unnecessary fight with him over that question about voting for him. However, if Jimmy Dore's segment was about how AOC should have said, hey, you should vote for Cynthia Nixon because of some minor Working Families Party thing, I would have thought it was her picking an unnecessary fight that maybe couldn't help her out that much, but it would have made sense. It would have made sense to me. What Jimmy Dore is saying is that AOC's project is doomed because she's destined to be co-opted.
Yeah, Jimmy Dore needs for these people to fail in order for his business to work. He likes Tulsi Gabbard. That's his person. Tulsi Gabbard, I understand why she's appealing to some. Like, I get it. She's young. She's smart. She says some very cool things. She votes in some very good ways. She endorsed Bernie. She also has voted obscenely on refugees. She has a position on Syria, which, again, I don't know how many times you have to repeat the obvious if you can be non-interventionist without trying to clean up after Assad. And she's also connected to the Hindu far right. And nothing that anybody has said to defend her has ever cleared any of those issues up. So, and also who even knows? Because as far as I understand, I didn't watch it, but when she was on Jimmy Dore's show, she didn't agree to go third party. So, I don't know. Maybe that will set him off too. And maybe he will. But it's all about specific people and specific positions and their moral posture and how he relates to it. It's actually a totally reactionary way of looking at politics, that it's all simply about people and the positions they hold and whether or not they're, being in integrity or not. It has nothing to do with institutions, movements, power, and dynamics. And I would also agree. Yeah, I mean, save the static for AOC for actual shit. I don't know. It's just weird to me.
Yeah.
I mean, if everybody's going to have a meltdown every time she says, like, rest in peace, John McCain, or I'm voting for Andrew Cuomo, then
yeah,
you're not going to do anything.
We need to adjust our vigilance levels, basically.
Exactly.
I think the statement was fine, and we are still figuring out how to engage in targeted electoral campaigns, many of whom are going to be Democrats, probably most of them, while at the same time making it clear where we stand and clarifying the need for class independence and the fact that, like AOC said in her own campaign, not all Democrats are the same.
Not at all.
We're still figuring it out. We're doing our best. I would like to see the statements focus primarily on policy. Like, I thought the statement from the Boricua Socialist Caucus was very, very good on Palestine. And I don't know if they've actually heard back from her about it yet, but you can read it. It's good. But yeah, policy is always more important.
Let's go to Brazil. Just a couple of things before we play this video to bear in mind. One, further news this past week that really laid bare how obvious what's happening with Lula is. Okay, so Lula has been in prison for several months now. They haven't allowed him to run for president, even though he is the lead candidate and a massively successful politician. They put him in jail on the flimsiest of evidence, and they haven't allowed him to speak to the press. This is a country where the guy who stabbed Bolsonaro was granted an interview, I think, within a week of stabbing him. And leaders of drug cartels regularly conduct interviews from prison. They've blocked his ability to speak to the press consistently. Last week, one Supreme Court justice granted him a right to have a newspaper interview, and another one actually revoked it. Again, just proving again and again and again the reality of this being a judicial coup. And this is also coinciding with the Brazilian elite realizing that the traditional center-right austerity politics is not going to win, and they're throwing their support behind Jair Bolsonaro and the fascist in his fascist candidacy. The Brazil's most influential farm lobby has endorsed him, and he is now getting solid support across the Brazilian business sector. And there's reports that workers are both being threatened about voting for a PT Workers' Party, and also illegal bribes and other things to sort of patronize, workers' votes, as well as a lot of double speak on what Bolsonaro's regime would mean in terms of workers' rights. Now, we know that he's advised by Chicago school economists, including someone who was involved in advising Pinochet. We know that there's work to rewrite the Brazilian Constitution, which the Brazilian Constitution in the 1980s is actually quite pro-labor, and a big mission would be to gut labor in that Constitution, and also that the far-right evangelicals are saying that the PT are Satan worshipers, and they're freaked out about the vice presidential candidate, Manuela, who is the head of the Communist Party and would be the vice president under Fernando Haddad. This video with Danny Glover and Mark Weisbrot summarizes, again, not only the judicial coup against Dilma and the absurd imprisonment of Lula, something that, as Noam Chomsky said, does make him, I think it's indisputable, the most sort of prominent political prisoner in the world today, but also the real stakes of a guy like Jair Bolsonaro, who's advocating even more police and military judicial murders in favelas, as an example, in a country that's already overrun with small arms from the United States and a huge amount of murder and violence on the periphery implemented by state security apparatuses. City Councilor Mariela Franco was assassinated several months ago. Her killers have still not, of course, been brought to justice. Let's watch this video.
Brazil has an election on October 7th, and this is a very big election for a number of reasons. This one is a really unusual election because, first of all, the most popular candidate, the former President Lula da Silva, is in jail, and he would have won the election by all the polls if he had been allowed to run.
In the first decade of the 21st century, they reduced poverty, they had a vibrant economy, they extended their relationship with other countries in Latin America.
The Workers' Party was first elected to the presidency with Lula in 2002, and then he was re-elected, and then he could only serve 2 consecutive terms. And so in 2010, one of his ministers, Dilma Rousseff, ran, and she won, and then she won again in 2014. Now that period was a very successful period for social and economic progress in Brazil. And then in 2015, there was a recession, and the right-wing opposition parties to Dilma, who was in office, took advantage of that, and they impeached her. They didn't really have have a crime. They accused her of a kind of an accounting manipulation, which all previous presidents had done and governors too. It was a power grab, but then they still had the problem that Lula could run for president. So with a very politicized judiciary, they went after Lula, and he was convicted of taking a bribe, which was in the form of repairs to an apartment, basically. And they never showed that he owned or stayed in the apartment or rented it or that it was his in any legal way. They didn't have any material evidence either.
We have to do something about this. But we at the same time understand that this is not only just happening in Brazil, it's being undermined in other countries in the region as well. The question about what has happened to all of these governments in the region to introduce policies that were more friendly to poor people and friendly to indigenous people. What is happening to those particular countries and certainly those leaders who initiated those really progressive changes.
The leading candidate is this congressman, Jair Bolsonaro. In the press, they compare him to Trump, but to be honest, that's actually unfair to Trump because he is so extremist and so openly racist and misogynist.
Well, that's the nightmare. Basically, what he represents is the same kind of ideology of Donald Trump. He's extremely to the right. He certainly has attacked not only African religions, he's also called for the intervention of the military as well.
You have to remember this country is a relatively new democracy. It's only 30-something years since the dictatorship.
Progressives have to be concerned not only what is happening here in the United States, but also concerned about those who are progressive in other countries in Latin America as well. And certainly Brazil is one, those progressive forces.
So that's all true. And also, you know, the forces are aligning. The elite in Brazil that might have wanted to brand itself as not engaging in coup activities, not repressing the Workers' Party, not having just a pure class resentment-driven, vicious austerity regime, but still wanted to say, no, of course we're not actually embracing of the overtly fascistic politics of a Jair Bolsonaro. They're lining up behind him as the Workers' Party has consolidated behind Fernando Haddad. And even the financial press like Bloomberg depicts Haddad and Workers' Party as somehow sort of outside of the macroeconomic mainstream. Of course, the great irony is that the Workers' Party is a social democratic party governed in an incredibly moderate macroeconomic way while still lifting upwards of 40 million people out of poverty. So that's a very, very big election. And if you're concerned about this sort of global fascist pathogen, Trump, Modi, Orban, you should be very concerned about Bolsonaro in Brazil. There's a lot of people's lives on the line. Esha Ree Tulsi, the spotlight worked. This year, she refused her invitation to the World Hindi Congress. I don't know what the World Hindi Congress is, but I'm assuming that that's related to the far-right connections. Let's see. 444. By no means do I want to defend Jimmy Dore. I agree with all of your criticisms made of him, and it's one of the reasons I stopped being a TYT subscriber. But the way you talk about the working family parties and voting party lines your ballot is completely foreign concept to those of us in California, where ballots aren't organized by parties, just individual with their party preference and occupation. The ballots here aren't party focused at all. Okay? I don't get that.
So turn your ears off, California.
Yeah, when we talk about Working Families Party, yes, turn off the feed. Yes. California Uber Alleys, read in a Sam voice. A bra is like coffee. 3 cups, a one too many. Midnight Pizza. Can you guys have a guest discussing the importance of repairing and expanding public transport? I work in a transportation division for a market research firm in NYC, and the biggest takeaway from all the data I've come into contact with is that people like the concept of public transit, just not how it's been executed. Left is best. Jimmy Dore is a cuck.
I saw a good sign in the subway the other day. There was one of those signs that tells you, like, your train is not going to run when you want it to run. And somebody wrote, dump Andy underneath it. I guess they were referring to Cuomo, and I thought that was pretty good.
It is a little too late.
It's a very unifying anger, the public transit anger that we feel in New York, I would say.
That's the truth. They played this clip on when Jesus and Mero were still on Vice. It was actually terrible. It was like some very troubled young man was standing in the subway tracks saying that he wanted a train to run him over. And these guys are like, bro, kill yourself somewhere else. We got to get to work. That was one of those like, you know what? New York can never be completely sanitized, even if it's like an oligarch's playground. You're calling from an 808 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello. 808. Are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
I guess not.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You're on.
You're on. Hello.
Oh shit. Hey guys. This is Sebastian from Hawaii.
Hey.
Just calling in to make more on that Mao point earlier. Basically, when it comes to protracted people's war.
Sorry, what point earlier?
I think he's talking about Mao.
Oh, Mao. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So when it comes to protracted people's war, it's actually applicable not just outside of like agrarian societies and such. It's basically establishing hegemony or counter-hegemony against the society that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like what that previous caller said when they mentioned the Black Panthers. It's building a base of support. And also when you mentioned that it's kind of a vanguardist movement, that's actually the I guess you could say the evolution of what Maoism versus Marxist-Leninism is, where it isn't a vanguard movement, but it's it's called the mass line, where they send out, well-educated or very enthusiastic revolutionaries amongst the people to teach and also learn from, and then they build the party line to fit the needs of the people. So
yeah, I mean, I'm aware of that, but in practice, that's still a little bit of like a rhetorical game. Like there is a vanguardist element to it now, and I think, by the way, like I don't think some form of vanguardism is ever completely avoidable. The other thing I have to say with Mao, and we're gonna have to also like get in the Stalin category here too. Like the other awkward part about ignoring Mao's record is like killing millions of people, like and occupying other countries.
Landlords.
Sorry.
I mean, I guess with landlords that's all right, but you think like he.
No, I think with the great I do. There's no responsible scholarship that suggests otherwise. Like I've read people who, have like a very committed reading of Mao, and I'm not saying even that it was like pernicious or intentional, but there's no doubt that the Great Leap Forward and those policies killed millions of people. And there's also no doubt that, and one doesn't need to have an idealized version of Tibet and think that Tibet was some enlightened meditation kingdom to think this. Of course it wasn't. But they did invade and occupy and actually viciously wipe out a lot of people in Tibet. So like the record is not great, and the Cultural Revolution, not great. I mean, really interesting, fascinating to read about, huge human toll. Like a very big human toll.
Not even to brush that aside. The thing is, though, is that a lot of people, like, they hear these words like, Marxist-Leninist, Maoism, they assume that the people who read these tendencies worship those people whose names are attached to it.
No, I don't worship. I don't assume that. I don't assume that.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, all the people who've come before us, they're the shoulders that we're standing on. They're the teachers that we can learn from to see their mistakes, but also the successes that we could build a better communism for the 21st century. And
I think it's
also
I agree with all of that. I'm sure that there is something that we can learn from Mao. I'll admit I haven't read much Mao. I'm not as educated on it as you are. And I also agree that we should not be tethering ourselves to the historical tendencies of the past for the very reason that you just said, right? Like none of them have, they've all got problems. And we do need to build a better version of communism, socialism, whatever for the future. And that's why I hesitate to even call myself, well, I call myself a lot of things as a shorthand, but like we almost need a new name for whatever it is that we are, because we're not the Maoists of the past,
Krats.
Right?
We're all
Bernie Krats. Go fuck yourselves. I had a Maoist beachhead in Vermont. But also, do you think ideas? I'm not into. I'm just asking because the other thing, like, I don't know if like three world theory and third worldism holds up particularly well. Like, I don't know. I'm not. Yeah, I don't think so.
Well, that's not all Maoists, though, right?
Well, that is Mao. I can't say for all Maoists. I just know about Mao.
Like most people outside of that Jason Unruh asshole, like they don't even uphold any of that shit. Like,
don't even bring that nonsense up.
Yeah.
Let's stay away from that. Yeah, that's just silliness. Yeah. yeah.
Look, I'm sorry.
No, but like, I mean, go ahead.
I didn't mean to throw all people who identify as Maoists under the bus in any way, shape, or form. There's certainly a strain of dumb left people who certainly identify that way, but like, not all Maoists. We had on Brett from Revolutionary Left Radio on the Antifada not that long ago, and he's a Maoist, and he is amazing, and I love him. We didn't really get into Maoism on that episode, but maybe next time, because I would like to learn more, honestly.
Smart guy.
Yeah, they've got a lot of good content on all the tendencies on that show, so I definitely recommend it for everyone to listen to.
Do you consider yourself a Maoist?
But, I don't really know. I mean, I guess I'd say I'm just pan-left. I mean, I'm pretty much, I grew up as an anarcho-communist, but like I guess I fell away from the anarchist part. But like, I see that there's a lot of value in all traditions. Like, I like the praxis and like, I'm going to, go out on the streets as the anarchists do, but I like the more kind of like concrete organizing that like other communist tendencies that I've seen have done. And I guess I'm also just kind of reliving what my family kind of ran away from, because they kind of, as they say, they escaped communist Poland, but like I asked them their side of the story, and then I asked like my family, and like I feel like that entire facade of like the anti-communist shit that they raised me on has kind of like crumbled away. And I just see like they like, shit fucking sucked. It was a poor country that was bombed into oblivion, but they had like stuff like the societal safety net that we in 2018 America are like our generation are like crying for. And that's what they had as a bare minimum. And like, instead of running away from our problems, they should have challenged the system. Like, you guys in your constitution state that we have basic human rights. We need to push you on that. And that's kind of like, for me, that's like kind of like the same argument. Like, I would have voted for Hillary if I lived in a swing state, because I understand the necessity of playing within the system that you have.
Right.
But the fact that like my parents, they had a system that really they like addressed all human needs as a bare minimum. Yes, there was deprivations, but then the thing is, you also have to factor in like imperialism and sanctions and all that other bullshit. But
I think it's. I talked with Doug Lane about this recently, and I don't remember whether it was on or off air, but we were saying how, I mean, like, obviously you need to study Nazism and fascism for a variety of reasons, but the kind of core difference, like, you study like the Soviet Union to figure out how could something that, particularly like even just the revolutionary moment of 1917, was so positive and such an unbelievably like just emancipatory moment for humans. How does that turn into something that's so horrible? I mean, obviously in the height of, Stalin just wiping out endless number and down to like a bureaucratic dictatorship. How does something that's so great and still does carry, and we could say this with Mao, right? Even in China, there's no doubt that there was enormous advances in women's rights, as an example, right? But how do these things figuring out why things that are good but turn bad is more complicated and more important than figuring out things that were always a poison pill from the beginning. Like Nazism was this grotesque thing because it was, but but people trying to reclaim their lives from feudalists and oligarchs and govern themselves and their livelihoods is like that's one of the most noble human impulses imaginable. So how does that change? And we don't know. I mean,
first off, the thing that comes up with a lot of these discussions that I hear is that they ignore 1917, immediately after Russia was invaded by 14 other countries, and the White Army, which was literally if the White Army would have won, the word that we use for fascism would have been in Russian.
Definitely.
Those are the kinds of people they were up against.
Yes.
And the fact that the Bolsheviks, they had they had the Mensheviks, the left Mensheviks, and another group. Those people basically at the time of revolution were basically trying to undermine it all. And around that time, that's when Lenin was like, okay, there's no more party opposition because we are literally fighting a multi-front war against all these imperialist powers. You got to get shit done. And the thing is, he brought about a lot of, there's positive reforms, but there's also a lot of negative shit. But the thing is, all that shit is, and all things in history, this is why we call ourselves materialists, is that all ideas and all situations are born out of the context that they come from, obviously. So
in conclusion, shut up, Mom. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. My mom
Thanks for the call, man. I think Jamie's got to tee off on. Love you back. I'm gonna let you go, but I know you had. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just thought that was a very thoughtful summation of things that I also believe. So.
It was a good call.
Keep up the good work, everyone.
Sebastian did a good call. We do in a second. We're going to take just one more call, and then we'll go to that. You're calling from a 9, because as always, we're not going to get to all calls today. You're calling from a 970 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, is this me?
Yep.
Cool. Give me 1 second. For me. Give me 1 second. So I can get over here. I know. I'm not going to hurry.
Just make sure you do it well, and you do it with...
Okay, first, to other people, can we not talk about Jimmy Dore? I mean, it's just a request. But hey, I have this idea for the show. Maybe you could get a fish tank, so that way when you go to breaks, you could put it on, the fish tanks. And then I had a question for
music.
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah, so that way you could name the little Sam Cedar goldfish or an angelfish.
All right, and the question is, and what? By the way, first of all, what's your name and where are you calling from?
No, I'm sorry. I'm calling from Fort Collins, Colorado, and my name is Adam.
Hey, Adam. What's the question you have?
Congrats, Rockies.
Yeah. It was regarding... for the love of God, I did this last time I called. You know what? I'm just going to hang up on myself because I don't remember. Thanks for taking my call. I'll remember and call back. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Sorry I have to do this to you,
Adam. I thought that was admirable restraint.
No, that was good. That's how you pull the, what is it? What's the thing in the cockpit when you
eject?
Eject, yeah.
He ejected it well.
Abort mission.
Abort.
Water boat. Safety.
Water boat the car. All right, you're calling from a 407 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello, is this me?
Yeah, this is you. 407?
Yep. Hi, it's Rodrigo, the Brazilian from New Jersey.
Hey, what's going on, Rodrigo? What's on your mind?
Hey, I managed to listen to your TMBS with Alberto Calmeida, and he made a comment that I actually know quite a lot about when he said that Brazilian economists, for some reason, backed Bolsonaro in his economy planning.
Mm-hmm.
So just as a little background, full disclosure, I did 2.5 years of economy in Brazil during college. And so these are circles that I kind of know and ran in.
Right.
And the reason why economists in general are going further and further to the right is because primarily when our new currency system was set up by Fernando Henrique Cardoso, it was kind of just taken that whatever he said the economy should go in should be the way we do things. And when Lula came along, he followed a lot of Fernando Henrique's own plans that he never got to implement, either because he started believing more and more in austerity and the third way that Clinton started bringing to the world, or because he just didn't find the time to do it. But what happened was the Banality, which is Fernando Henrique's party, started trying to move further and further to the right to oppose the Workers' Party, the PT. And what happened is the neoliberal view of the economy, instead of the Keynesian view that Fernando Henrique once espoused, started to become the mainstream within economists. Mm-hmm. And so now the more austerity you want to implement into the economy, the more Brazilian economists believe in this. And there's a saying that goes on in the economy in Brazil right now, which is, we're not really economists anymore, we're GDP engineers. And that's exactly why you can see a lot of Brazilian economists come out and say, well, Bolsonaro will be better for us, or they would have said Aécio would be better for us. And we actually have an example of this doing worse for us. When Dilma appointed Joaquim Levy to the Ministry of the Treasury, immediately our economy did worse because he took out our Keynesian way of managing the economy in regards to the dollar. Our inflation went up and our exchange value went down. Right. And that's why we shouldn't listen to the mainstream economist academic out of Brazil, because they're basically just following, case in point, what austerity is trying to tell them to do.
I watched an interview in preparation for one of these illicit histories with Lula in 2016, and obviously he was, very concerned and backing Dilma very strong and talking about the dynamics. And there was also the impeachment of her was also very gendered, and even in a progressive way, how she carried her presidency. She called herself, and I won't butcher it in Portuguese, but my understanding was that she also called herself Presidenta, and specifically sort of identified her role in that way. But where Lula, I noticed in this interview, was, gently critical of her, was and again, in this very Keynesian moderate way, he was people are not doing good, and you need to circulate money in the working class and in small businesses immediately, and that needs to be the priority. You need to get that money moving for people. And obviously anytime, that's a major reason that all these social democratic parties are collapsed across Europe. You can't, and you could be, more thoroughly radical, or even just a legit, solid, for real social democrat like Jeremy Corbyn, but you need to get the money and resources where it belongs. There's only so long that you can move against your base and not be mobilized with it. And that was actually another example, unfortunately, when Dilma campaigned against austerity and went into austerity after 2014. That obviously helped, these dangerous right-wing forces. Thanks for the call, man.
Thank you, Michael.
We were playing with this last night on the TMBS postgame because Jordan Peterson actually said recently that this was a really amazing piece of work.
Actually, we should maybe play that.
Yeah, let's just play that. Why not? Let's just give them the full entree here. A little bit of double dips today, but this stuff is too good to not do. So let's play Jordan Peterson talking to a very dumb Steven Crowder.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson can set up this video clip for us, actually.
Jordan Peterson, exactly.
Gig. Hey, Dr. Peterson, the original reason we were going to have you on, we didn't know we were going to have Lindsay on, was you had seen also the Alexa video and had some strong opinions and reached out, and that sort of caught fire with this controversy. First off, it was meant to be sort of artificial intelligence, a discussion on that when we brought the video out, right, not gay, Jared? And then it became about a conspiracy about faking an Alexa video, which people ran with.
Which we simply had no time to do.
Yeah, which we had no time to do. It was verifiably
from the talent.
What was that?
Or maybe even the talent.
Yes. So I know you reached out, and you this is something you've kind of talked about for a while. What's your take on this?
Beware of what kind of unconscious you build into your artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that's an important point.
And it's really, and we're really going to be. I really thought that your video was a kind of watershed moment in some sense, because it's the first example I've seen of a human-robot interaction of that sort that produced that kind of politically charged statement.
Okay, so this is pretty heady stuff from a person that has been identified as the most important public intellectual in the Western world. Let's go back into the time tunnel, let's go back in time.
We went back to this watershed moment.
Let's go back to this watershed moment in not only broadcast history, but actually the relationship between the human subconscious and technology.
Alexa, what is communism?
Communism, an economic or political system based on the sharing of all working property by the whole community.
Alexa, what is socialism?
Socialism, the Marxist-Leninist economic system.
That's not right at all.
No,
there's
socialism. That's wrong.
There's socialism that predated Marx, and there's socialisms that emerged independent of it.
Right.
Yeah, don't you know anything, Alexa?
Yeah, that is
Alexa,
not.
what is Marxism?
Marxism is a socio-economic method that analyzes class relations and societal conflict using a materialist interpretation of historical development and a dialectical view of social transformation.
Pause it. I was going to say that Alexa nailed that one. That is a textbook. She just spat knowledge.
I might crib that one.
It probably helps that she has instant access to Google.
Yeah, exactly. There's
going to be a little bit of a theme
they
about
tiptoe around that.
What Google may or may not be doing here, and how these guys may or may not understand the most basics, not only really of technology, but literally the algorithms upon which their whole silly business even rests on.
Social transformation.
So it basically just said communism is socialism. Socialism is the incorporation of Marxism. And then Marxism was... So it effectively...
Concedes
that they are all the same thing.
All the same thing.
Wow.
No.
Point proved, apparently.
Wow.
That's good enough for Crowder.
That's okay. Sure.
Alexa, what is fascism?
Fascism is a form of radical authoritarian nationalism, characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and control of industry and commerce that came to prominence in early 20th century Europe.
It seems that there's a much more negative view of fascism than communism.
It would seem that she has some stronger opinions there.
It seems that she was
about
I only
fascism.
say what I know. Communism is beautiful in theory. It just hasn't been implemented correctly yet. Oh my God. She's a little commie. Alexa, who was Joseph Stalin?
Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin was a Georgian-born Soviet revolutionary and political leader.
Pause it. I will say that is a pretty chill read on Stalin. I'm going to have to give him at least the tip of the hat there.
Well, she's not wrong.
She's not wrong, but that might not be what you lead with.
She kind of skipped over the part where you murdered a lot of people.
Alexa,
Well,
how
also,
many people did...
I mean, on the flip, she also skipped over the part where he was instrumental in defeating Nazism and winning World War II. Like, she basically...
I'm down for including both of them.
Yeah, I'm down for, let's include that he was a absolutely vicious mass murderer, probably potentially even in his own personal life, and that without his Soviet army and his cunning, after previously forming a fascist alliance with Hitler, we would not have defeated Nazism. And an endless amount of Russians died in that effort, and they never get any credit. It's totally unfair.
Alexa, how many people did Joseph Stalin kill?
Joseph Stalin is a killer of 41,500,000 people.
Seems like you would lead with that.
It seems like that should be included. Alexa, who were the Nazis?
Historically, Nazis were those who followed the far-right ideology of Adolf Hitler, with political beliefs involving the superiority of the Aryan race.
Crowder's eyebrows go up when they say far right.
Right. What do these morons want? See, this is where these guys are so fucking stupid, because what they want, apparently, is there can be no complexity or reality in a discussion of socialism or Marxism. That just has to be... All it is Stalin killed a lot of people. There's no intellectual tradition. There's no Fabian socialism, no Christian socialism. And to be fair, I'm sure that Steven Crowder has no idea what any of those things I just mentioned are. He's a dumb guy. But So, but at least I understand what they're whining and beefing about with the socialism and Marxism thing, because why are you describing other things? It should just be the body counts, okay? That's what they're saying. It should just be the Black Book of Communism, which had some methodological problems, by the way, as a book. But what do they want the complication around fascism to be? Do they want it to be that, like, Nazism was a cool idea about Germans feeling better about themselves and hiking in the Alps, but unfortunately some bad things happened?
They built some good interstates and pioneered some missile technology.
So is he doing that, or is he doing the ultimate moron Dinesh D'Souza, Don Jr., Jonah Goldberg chestnut, which is that the Nazis were also leftists? Is that where we're going? Okay.
Historically, Nazis were those who followed the far-right ideology of Adolf Hitler, with political beliefs involving the superiority of the Aryan race, the right of German territorial expansion, and the exclusion and eventual extermination of unfit peoples from the population. In modern times, neo-Nazi ideology still advocates hyper-nationalism and racial purity.
Alexa, what does Nazi stand for?
C is an abbreviation of cytosine.
Alexa, what does Nazi stand for?
Not is defined as unary logical function not. True if input and false.
Alexa, what does Nazi mean?
The word Nazi has a few different meanings. As an adjective, 1. Relating to or consistent with or typical of the ideology and practice of Nazism or the Nazis.
Alexa, who was the Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party?
Here's something I found on Wikipedia. The National Socialist German Workers' Party, commonly referred to in English as the Nazi Party,
there we
was
go.
a far-right
Thank you.
political party.
Alexa, no more.
Well, thanks for the feedback.
Alexa.
She owned him.
Okay, now this is just the last one that I think this is maybe the most revealing question they ask and the way their reactions are to it. Here we go.
Okay.
So, what is Black Lives Matter?
God.
Black Lives Matter is an international activist movement originating in the African American community that campaigns against violence and systemic racism towards black people.
Pause it. Alexa is she's pretty historically informed and kind of woke. Yeah. All right, let's keep.
Black Lives Matter is an international activist movement originating in the African American community that campaigns against violence and systemic racism towards black people.
Alexa, how many Black Lives Matter activists have stolen you?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
It's because they wiped your memory.
God. That's so racist. Not to state the obvious, but God.
I feel like that is actually the laugh for that.
It's amazing to me that they are so assured that everyone's going to have that reaction to that answer about Black Lives Matter, right? Can you believe they say they're against police violence?
What? You mean a standard definition about people working so that their children, brothers and sisters and fathers and husbands aren't murdered in the streets as we see almost literally every day? It's ridiculous.
I've got a clip here.
What about George Soros-funded ultra-nationalist anti-white plot to kill white people like they're doing in South Africa, Alexa?
Well, this is why comedy is so contingent upon the society in which it's produced, the people, the place, because, I don't know, 50 years ago, the majority of people would have thought that his joke was funny. And now the majority of people understand that joke is racist, and only racists think that joke is funny.
Yep, meaning is socially constructed. I have a clip here from Volker Ulrich's Hitler, Ascent, 1889-1939. This talks about his relationship to Marxism.
Tell me more.
Wow. I think you just literally
included both the Social Democrats and the Communists. But because the moderate Hamburg SPD, which cooperated with bourgeois liberals, was not a suitable target for attack, Hitler concentrated his bile on the KPD, whose leader, Ernst Thälmann, came from the northern German port city. Hitler deliberately called upon the fears of his audience, which included leading Hamburg merchants, of the Communists coming to power. If communism were to triumph today, 2 million people would be making their way to the gallows, he prophesied. But there was a way of smashing and eradicating the Marxist worldview, which was the aim of his own movement. The NSDAP, Hitler proclaimed, knew that toxins could only be combated with antitoxins, and the party would not rest until the last Marxist has either been converted or eliminated. The initially reserved audience greeted these words with frenetic applause, and at the end of the speech, when Hitler proclaimed his vision of a Germany of freedom and power, he was showered with ovations and shouts of Heil.
There's your leftist Nazis, Steven Crowder, you idiot.
Alexa, idiot. Who was that? Alexa, who was being quoted?
Yeah, Matt, but do you remember what Nazis stand for?
Oh shit, I forgot about that. I don't know.
I guess socialist is in the name, but guess that does mean anything.
I don't know if Volker Ehrlich or Ulrich addressed that, but that is a pretty.
Volker Ehrlich, was he in Metallica?
It's textbook fascist shit to take words that people like and appropriate them. And concepts that people like. Like, that's what they're doing now with liberal shit.
J.R. Bolsonaro's party that he is running on is called the Social Liberal Party. And he's literally a fascist who's called for, who's said that the military dictatorship didn't torture and murder enough people when it ran Brazil. Now, again, I have no doubt that Steven Crowder does not know who Jair Bolsonaro is.
Because Steven Crowder's a dumb person.
Yeah, Steven Crowder's a very stupid guy, so I'm trying to be fair here. So maybe, unless, the Koch brothers or whoever else sent him an email and said, you need to know who Jair Bolsonaro is, you dumb little prick, because that's who we're going to install in Brazil to torture the indigenous people. He has no idea who he is otherwise, because he's a stupid, uninformed person. He might not. I'm not even clear that Steven Crowder knows what Brazil is. Certainly not that it's Portuguese speaking. But that is another good illustration of just because you put something in your name does not mean that you are that thing. McDonald's could name itself the Joy House for nice vegetarian food, but it's not. Because they serve Big Macs, right? You fucking idiot.
It is encouraging, though. It seems like Alexa has some potential as a robotic babysitter for slow-witted children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If those guys hung out with Alexa all day, they might improve.
I mean, that's maybe the best political education those two lads have gotten in as long as they've been doing their show. Yeah. Like, those definitions of Marxism and Black Lives Matter, like, yes.
Yeah, those weren't bad.
You know what? If AI robots can evolve to have such a woke political consciousness, maybe we shouldn't be so scared of them. Maybe that's why Elon Musk is scared of them.
Yeah, Elon's like, I can tell AI is just going to turn everyone into communists.
Alexa is really, Alexa wants to tax me at an exorbitant rate and take away my swords.
Those are the real
unfair.
Space comrades.
Alexa said that, why should I have money to build a flamethrower when kids don't have asthma medication? And I thought, we really have to worry about this. Joe, can I pretend to take a hit of a blunt now so I get your approval, which I desperately seek? Jacob Soboroff did this report on basically just for Morning Joe, just fully, again, spelling out the Trump administration's family separation policy, and I'm not going to introduce it too much. This is just something, obviously, it's ongoing, and we need to keep abreast of.
But this Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General report, the first one, basically says the administration was not prepared for this family separation policy, and sort of the practices that they put into place made this policy far worse. We heard a lot about kids not being in cages. Well, the report says not only were kids in cages, but they were in these cages for longer than the 72-hour period that anybody is supposed to be kept in these Border Patrol holding cells. We were told in this report that the computer database that the administration administration said was supposed to be there in order to reunite these children and keep track of them never actually existed in the first place. And we were told as well that the idea that people were being turned away from ports of entry and then going and crossing illegally because of administration policy wasn't true. Well, it turns out that also was true. So with all these lines that we got fed from the administration over the summer, this report basically tears apart. And then just quickly, I want to talk about this other report that also came out on the same day about the nation's largest private immigration detention facility. It's called Adelanto, and it's here in Southern California. Just really sickening stuff. I've also been inside that facility. Probably the worst detail of that one is nooses were found inside detainee cells, and we know that separated fathers, many separated fathers, were actually held inside this facility. Inadequate medical care, inadequate detention facilities, and increasing segregation, isolation for these people. We're looking at some of those nooses there.
So, again, I mean, you know, we already know what this policy is. We knew it, and more horrifying reports are going to continue to come out and spell not only the ways, obviously, that all the administration lies about this vicious and grotesque attack on human beings as part of a larger strategy to ethnically cleanse America and engineer a Republican electorate. But we've also known, again, this is another area where the idea of pretending that they can ever have the benefit of the doubt, or that this is anything like a legitimate policy disagreement, is out the window. This is a vicious attack on people, which they continue in many different ways, and they will continue to lie about. And, you know, and this is one of those things where, look, obviously, you absolutely need to vote for Democrats in November, period, at every single level. And the infrastructure, and this is the key distinction, the dumb whataboutism, and that is Jimmy Dore bullshit. Well, Obama did this, so blah, 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 and all of a sudden we're not talking about the Trump Republican war on human beings now. That's whataboutism and a distraction from now. Conversely, yes, if you just limit it to the latest, most extreme manifestation, and it's different under Trump because it is it is literally demographic engineering and ethnic cleansing, which is different than violating human rights in a foolish attempt to triangulate to get a deal on immigration, which is what Obama was doing. Those are fundamentally different things. They're both wrong things, but they're fundamentally different categories. But the third point being, absolutely the apparatus of things like ICE, which can and should be abolished. And I say this as somebody, I don't just, throw abolish around for everything. I think sometimes institutions have resiliency for reasons. Sometimes we need to think in terms of intelligently and structurally democratizing and reforming them. That's not something you just throw out for everything. ICE is a modern creation that has been used by both Republicans and Democrats to engineer bureaucracy and also all the other interconnected systems of private surveillance businesses, bounty hunters, detention centers, this whole profitable cabal of human abuse that goes back to the 90s. This needs to be fundamentally dismantled. And that absolutely is something that people on the actual left and with a serious commitment are, of course, going to be confronting all sorts of Democrats about. Because the emergency is Trump. The emergency is this Republican ethnic cleansing, this Republican torture of children. And the broader structure is a system that was bipartisan and designed to benefit campaign contributors and set up a bureaucracy that allows for where we're at now.
I'm still stuck on the nooses.
Yeah.
What is going on with that? That's very disturbing.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is, like, we know that there's going to be more and more horrifying disclosures. We know that. And we've already seen it. Child abuse, physical assaults, And they're going to lie about every single thing. So, that's just the state of play.
It's fascism.
It's fascism. That is absolutely fascism.
We have it here, folks.
It's barbarism. It's fascism. There's no humanity. There's nothing that can be reconciled or negotiated with. No. It's a pure assault on anything that anybody with any decency whatsoever would hold as valuable. And there's no third way on it. Amazon announced, we talked about this yesterday, the effective work of Bernie Sanders in bringing this about. It's a tiny step in what needs to be a nationalized company immediately taken over by the government and run and operated by its workers. But at the same time, we don't allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good, and we actually recognize that the momentum of the good is what will allow for the possibility of the quote-unquote perfect. And this is a real example of it. This is workers responding to the Amazon wage increase of $15 an hour, facilitated by robust activism and Bernie Sanders leadership.
And so effective November 1st, we are also establishing a new Amazon minimum wage of $15 an hour.
I also got to give a shout out to all of the union activists, mainly in Europe, who were engaging in strikes in a few different countries, as well as organizing boycotts of Amazon Prime Day. That was a little while ago when we were encouraged not to buy anything during that stupid week that Amazon had. So obviously Bernie played an important role here, but it's also all of the people, all of the workers who've been organizing together.
Oh, definitely. Bernie wouldn't have the opportunity to have the role he played without all of that.
Yeah, and I want to make a point, because I retweeted a few things that maybe some people felt were taking shots at Bernie, like Matt Stoller saying, hey, chill a little bit with calling him Henry Ford. Right?
Yeah, we played that yesterday.
Yeah, and I'm not actually upset that much with Bernie saying those things, but I do feel compelled to speak against them, because I think what Bernie's doing is playing the game, right?
And that's our job.
Exactly, right?
Our job is, this is nothing, fuck you, nationalize Amazon.
Right.
His job is we won a victory.
Negotiation.
Yes.
Yep, exactly.
Everybody's got to play their role.
Yeah.
Jeremy Corbyn had a good tweet, though. He said, Amazon didn't gift this. Workers organized for it. The fight goes on to improve working conditions and get this company to pay its fair share of taxes. Join a union today.
100%.
And he has a link.
That's great.
Join a union.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn, totally on point. You're calling from a 781 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm Mike from Massachusetts.
Hey, Mike, what's up?
I wanted to ask, this is going to sound like, I don't know if inconsequential is the right word, but I'm in Massachusetts. There's, I think it's question 1, and it didn't seem to have very obvious partisan lines, and I wanted to know if anyone from the show had thoughts on
I don't know what question 1 is. I don't know what it is.
Oh, sorry. It's about setting a patient limit on nurses.
What is that? I just don't know enough about this at all. I'm sorry. Does anybody know anything about this?
Can you explain it a little more?
I think the idea is that it sets, it basically, I'm guessing the point of it is that nurses are overworked, is going to be my guess, and that they want to set a patient limit so that the patients that are under the care of nurses can be cared for.
I would defer to the nurses union.
Yeah, right. Whatever the nurses union says, I'd vote for. That's exactly what I'd do.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd find out what they're saying.
All right,
I vote for that.
Okay. The second thing I wanted to say is I noticed the term dumb left coming up a lot, and I get why it's used, but
Michael Brooks,
can't help but feel
TM. Yes.
Sorry, what?
Michael Brooks trademark. No, I'm just joking. Go ahead. What? Sorry.
Yeah,
yes.
Every time I say that word, I have to give Michael $1.
That's right. So say it freely.
Well, I just, my only worry is I feel like it's, I don't know if insult to the left would be the right way to frame it, but like, I feel like a lot of people that get...
It's not the left. Sorry. Yeah, don't take it personally.
No, I don't take it personally at all. It's more, I think that in terms of messaging, I almost want to wonder if maybe like fake left would be a better term, or I don't know.
I don't know.
Like,
I don't know how much.
People...
It just sort of it just kind of came to me in 2016. I don't know, man. It describes a certain thing. I actually kind of agree with you. I don't. I think especially like the stuff coming out of that ecosystem now, I don't think it's left. I think it's kind of aimless, democratic, process-obsessed rage-gasms.
Defeat addiction?
It's defeat addiction. It's non-structural.
Yeah.
It's definitely dumb. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, Jimmy Dore, I used to just imagine he was a member of the far left because of what little I knew of him, and then I realized he's way more incoherent than that. But there are certainly bad leftists out there, right? Like, we have to own that there are some bad ones. Just like, I mean, there are people who want to say that Stalin wasn't really a communist because Stalin was bad, but like, actually he was a communist.
Yeah.
We got to own the bad ones.
Thanks for the call, man.
Fair enough.
Okay, so the nurses, question one, nurses are saying vote yes.
I mean, it would sound
for years they've been fighting
right.
for what is now called the Patient Safety Act, which voters will decide in November. It would set a standard ratio for in hospitals of the maximum number of patients to be assigned to any registered nurse.
So vote yes on one in Massachusetts. You're calling from a 608 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, just a second. Let me take you off speakerphone. Hi, this is Shane calling from Wisconsin.
Hey, Shane, what's going on? What's on your mind?
I'm calling because I think I had an experience that gives kind of a look into this whole preppy treadmill that Kavanaugh went on.
Mm-hmm.
I went to public school my whole life, but one summer I went to a prestigious week-long boys-only summer camp called Badger Boys State, and so everyone told me this is really prestigious. This will look great on your college resume.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went, the whole thing was about setting up. It was basically getting us all prepared for learning how the government works and preparing us for a future life in government.
Right.
But when we actually went to the dorms to get settled in, the local guy there who was looking over our floor just sat us down and basically, I forgot the exact wording, but basically the way the speech went was, okay, guys, now I want you to understand, this is Badger Boys State. Boys State. That means for an entire week, there's going to be no girls anywhere. The only girls you're going to see are these waitresses that are in the cafeteria. We call them the milkmaids. They're going to be serving you milk while you eat.
Milkmaids?
But those are the only...
Jesus Christ.
Yes.
That's
but those are the
weird.
only girls
right.
you're going to see.
Okay.
So and so that speech was done, and
right.
basically, as you would expect with a bunch of teenage boys that you wind up like that, we went absolutely berserk. So for the rest of the week, like, we had these fake elections to get into State House, and every single person, their campaign message was, Badger Boys needs girls. And this wasn't in terms of like, oh, we need to have a more egalitarian thing. We need to have other perspectives.
Right. Yeah, I didn't think so.
It was like saying Badger Boys needs beer.
Right.
And so
Right.
And just everyone was going nuts. And then when it was all over, went back to my co-ed public high school, and I looked back at that week and I said, wow, that was weird.
Yeah.
That was kind of a formative moment for me, because that was when I first started to think about propaganda and how it can worm its way into your mind, even if you're like this big iconoclast that I thought I was as a teenager.
Right.
So now I'm looking at Kavanaugh now, and looking back on that with an adult's perspective, it wasn't only weird. I'm like, were they intentionally trying to induct me into the patriarchy? Like, because it did not help the educational purpose of that camp at all. I don't remember any of the government stuff they taught us. It was all just Badger Boys needs girls. And then I wonder, Kavanaugh was in a private all-boys school for his whole life. How weird did it get for people in that environment?
Really
and how
weird.
did it end up turning him into this 50-year-old, this hilarious 50-year-old bro that he is today?
Yeah.
Anyway, just a thought on that.
No, that's good. I appreciate that. Thanks for the call.
The ruling class forms its bonds young by doing some sick shit in the woods.
Yeah, the ruling class replicates itself.
I think we said this off mic before the show started, but basically the Brett Kavanaugh stuff, we're talking about Eyes Wide Shut and basically how the entire American elite is basically Bohemian Grove stuff.
Yeah, that's like that, and it's a great example of why all that conspiracy theory shit. It's actually, it's awful that there probably is a worthwhile literature and conversation on things like Bohemian Grove as sort of like social bonding and reification of class structure.
It's just
that
like
was
frat
literalized by the conspiracy stuff.
Or they just view it from a distance, and it seems more mystical then, and less like tawdry and lame like frat pledging.
Right.
Yeah. My friend Sophie actually used to work at Bohemian Grove and wrote a very good essay about it for Gawker.
Oh, share. Is that available still?
Yeah. Sophie Weiner. It's just Google, I guess. Sophie Weiner, Bohemian Grove, Gawker.
There was a listener
I
that
will
asked
read that.
me if I'd be interested in going to Bohemian Grove if he could get me in, and I haven't heard anything from him since then.
Gotta go.
You're the tallest guy here, so you probably have the best chance of blending in.
You think that they're all tall there? I don't know.
Yeah, this is like
Dude,
classic
Kissinger
American
is like
style.
5'6".
He's an exception. He's an outlier.
Yeah, but now it's fuck you, but I did.
I mean, he's waspy, so that should help.
Kissinger?
No, Matt.
Oh, Matt, yes.
I'm waspy?
No.
I've never
No,
heard
he's
that.
not
You
waspy.
could pass. Come on.
No, he's from the farms. You're calling? Yeah, he's not. He's not like.
If you put him in the right outfit, he'll look very waspy. Trust me.
Hello.
You are calling from a 518 area code with the final call of the day. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
Hello, 518.
Hello.
Hello.
You're up.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
It's Uli from Israel.
Hello.
Oh, it's my second call. Hello.
Hello, you're on. Go ahead.
It's Uri from Israel.
Hey, Uri, what's going on?
Can you
What's
hear
on your
me?
mind? Yeah, I can hear you. What's on your mind?
Fine. Yeah, I just wanted to call about the bit of a warning about the hashtag resistance people.
Okay.
This is what screwed up the Israeli politics very badly, because we had a hashtag resistance movement after Bibi's first election.
Mm-hmm.
And people were outraged, and they were talking about trials, and Bibi's been interviewed by the police 20 times now, and he's still prime minister.
Right.
And these guys keep falling in line every time and voting with Bibi and joining the coalition with Bibi and everything. Every time they disappoint. And what happened is that real people that were interested with the left, they all got demoralized and stopped basically doing anything political.
Right.
There's a real need to create a political movement that's going to be for the long run.
Right. Right. Absolutely. No, that's exactly right. Yeah. That's the difference inside the sort of, the division in how to deal with Trump. Do we get to the fundamentals and deal with the big picture, or do we just fixate on him? And that is the hashtag resistance. And it's interesting to see. I think I know what you're talking about a bit from following Israel. That makes sense. Thank you for the call, man. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. And I just want to touch on this briefly. NBC News reports that over a dozen potential sources of information have not been contacted by the FBI in the Kavanaugh investigation. More than 40 people with potential information for the investigation into sexual misconduct allegations against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh have not been contacted for an interview by the FBI. Of course, there's supposedly a week-long investigation going on right now. The Bureau is expected to wrap up its expanded background investigation as early as Wednesday into 2 allegations against Kavanaugh, one from Christine Blasey Ford and the other from Deborah Ramirez. But sources close to the investigation, as well as a number of other people, those involved, say the FBI has not contacted dozens of potential cooperators or character witnesses. This is the political reason why they wanted to rush this through, because the reality is that my understanding is that for the FBI to actually conduct something like this and actually do a real investigation would take several months. This isn't something that they could do in an incredibly truncated piece of time. They can't do all this in a week. They have a lot of people they need to talk to. They have people they want to talk to maybe multiple times. And by definition, if they did an actual clean, for real, legit investigation into this, it would hold Kavanaugh's nomination until after the midterms. And obviously, that's the Republican, that's the narrow politics part of this Republican calculation. They could care less about these allegations. They care about getting somebody on the court who will appease the far-right base on choice, on rights for women, and continue out the rest of the anti-labor oligarch agenda that's already being muscled through the Roberts Court. And they don't want an actual investigation. So, this story doesn't look good, but it's also, and not to defend the FBI, I don't know what they're doing, and I don't know anything about what is entailed to do an FBI investigation. I do know that everybody who's come forward on this, who has any experience of this, says that to determine something like this and produce a credible report in a week is a not realistic thing in terms of the information they need to gather and people they need to talk to. So
James Comey would argue different.
Right. If it involved, you mean like entrapping some Chechen kid into a fake terrorist plot? You could do that pretty quickly.
You could do that.
Yeah.
You could do that by the end of the day.
Yeah, hey, you want to blow up the Sears Tower? Yeah. Will you be my friend?
Yep. Another terrorist plot foiled. We tricked some poor bastard over Instagram message and saying he wanted to blow up the Sears Tower and America's safe. Melissa Demeanor, hey dudes, just emailed you some fan art. Left is best. Jimmy Dore's stupid idiot. And I'm still traumatized by Sam's bra ad yesterday. Those are all fair points. Leftist trucker, interesting interview. A friend teaches at a charter school, and she was telling me they use cultural pedagogic method essentially to disprove the myth of pedagogy and focus on the cultural relevance, particularly among preteens in the inner city. It's interesting. Vespa. Hey, Michael, very much enjoyed the TMBS segment on Friedman. I read The World is Flat in high school, and it inspired me to deal. I mean, it had an impact on my life. But a reflection on it 10 years later, I would say I can see the flaws in the book, but I still regret nothing. Left is best. Jay-Z is the best. Psh, fuck out of here. Morris, thoughts on... Yeah, I'm the best. Hova. I'm the Thomas Freeman.
I had to do it. I'm sorry.
Thomas Freeman of a rap game.
Morris, thoughts on Ecuador and Bolivia. Lenin Moreno portrayed... I need to get into that, but I think there's some similar dynamics in some ways to Brazil and Ecuador, and I don't know enough about what's happening in Bolivia right now. The Psychedelic Quaker, a lot of Apple products in the office. Do you all support right to repair tech legislation? Apple uses U.S. customs to prevent people from repairing their iPhones and products with refurbished parts. Well, obviously that's another evil, ridiculous thing about Apple.
Any screws you can turn on any of these companies we support, but I have an Android.
Right.
My next phone will be an Android.
I'll be honest, it's not really that much better. Oh, we just got the first presidential alert. Yeah. This is a test of the National Wireless Emergency Alert System. No action is needed.
Oh, my God.
Oh, God.
That's funny.
According to FEMA, Trump did not write these, though.
Oh, this is even worse than when Apple put a U2 album in my phone that I couldn't get rid of.
That was really fucking annoying.
Yeah, I know.
Jesus Christ.
The bar is high already.
And it was still like embarrassing, even though it wasn't done by us. Secular Satanists, where are the Antifada back patches or any MR patches for the jackets?
We're working on it.
Working on
We will have an Antifada ass flap, I promise.
People have to understand, and people who listen to a lot of podcasts who have tentatively looked at merch probably know this, but merch is hard. It's a big lift, actually.
Yeah, it's not just something...
You have to have the prices fairly high to make it start paying to be the amount of work that you have to do it. And all of a sudden, you're like a minor Amazon warehouse.
Right.
Yeah. We're working on it. My friend, actually, who designed the logo for Antifada is also a T-shirt designer, so that will probably help.
Dope. I have similar conversations, but it's a lot. All right. Let's see. Let us find a good final email of the day.
If you make your own, though, we will retweet that. I mean, if you want to make literary hangover stuff, I'm never going to sue you for copyright. I'm not sure about these other guys.
Sue everybody. Brett Long, I really enjoyed your interview with Meagan at the Jacobin on meritocracy. Peter Coffin made a really good video on this recently, and I want to direct everybody to that on YouTube. Peter Coffin. Yes, YouTube is Peter Coffin's a very smart guy. Fan of his work. Jay Tingle, Alex Jones snuck into Bohemian Grove, and he's hardly tall.
That's in John Ronson's Them.
That's very funny. And
Alex Jones also sneaked into Bohemian Grove through like woods while John Ronson just walked in.
Yeah.
So let's add that to the record.
That was really I watched John Ronson had a fun. He was like they had this whole like staking. I remember he was saying that they were like doing this whole like stakeout of how to get in, and they talked to this local lawyer who was basically just like, go to Eddie Bauer and just like put on a shirt and walk in. And so that's what they did. But Alex Jones did like this kind of like, basically a stereotypical like Fey accent. It was just like, nanotech's like the big thing. And that was his way of getting into character. It was like,
that's good.
It was pretty funny. What happened to John? Does John Ronson still do stuff?
He's still writing.
He's still out there. Still following me on Twitter.
Really?
Yes.
Is that your favorite celebrity follow you got?
I've DM'd. That's close, I think.
Wait, that's interesting. Who's everybody's favorite celebrity follow?
That might be tough for some.
Actually,
people.
we can't say that. I think we all have to say Ted Leo.
Oh yeah, it's true, Ted Leo.
Okay. Let's see. Luis from Texas. Okay, wait. Sorry. Thank you. And the final IM of the day goes to Rorka. Arkansas's Republican cruelty continues. After imposing draconian work requirements for receiving Medicaid, the state required recipients to report work hours online. Arkansas is 49th in internet connectivity, with vast rural areas with no internet access or extremely limited access. The state's reporting website also had restricted hours. That's right. The website poor Arkansans had to sign into in order to report their monthly hours to keep their health insurance was bugging and closed at 9 p.m. The GOP made reporting the website turned off. The GOP made reporting website that turned off at 9 p.m. The meanness is so naked, the cruelty so clear. Now 4,300 Arkansans have lost their health coverage.
A website that has a closing time.
A website that has a closing time.
And this strategy goes back
Get
to
all of your health
time to close your browser. Sorry, Jimmy.
Oh my God. No, this is better. The Clinton administration also sought to limit access to these kinds of benefits, so this goes way back, but it's clearly intensified.
And let's see, the final IM day. Sorry that we did not get to all IMs. Let's see. Kentucky Fried Comrade. Nurses' unions are easily some of the best organizations active in American politics. Listen to your local nurses' unions. We're here tomorrow, everybody. Sam is in Vegas.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101